everyone, and welcome to Handmade Hero. Today we are going to we kind of decided last weekend that I didn't want to push the lighting any further. I think we can do more, and someday might do more, but I think it's looking quite nice now. And I think we can finish, we could basically finish the game with this level of lighting quality, because it looks nice and it shows us a reasonable version of what we could expect from any final lighting system. I mean, it looks really nice in my opinion, and you could balance the game art this way. And then if you improve a few things, there are some things you could improve. The main thing is the squariness here. If we did improve some of that someday, I don't think that's going to be a material issue for us, meaning I don't think we have to really worry about that suddenly radically changing the look of the game in some way that causes us to have to go back and redo a bunch of work or anything like that. So my feeling is we could sort of leave it here and not really go any further not really go any further down the rabbit hole of improving the lighting, because it's now quite nice. I had originally said, oh, maybe we'll just regress and not use the advanced lighting, but then when we actually looked at just switching it to 2D, it really does work quite nicely and looks great. So I really have no concerns about that, and I'm totally happy with it. I think there's some minor improvements we could make in the future to it, but that's fine. So I think it's time to concentrate on other stuff, which is just finishing up some world gen stuff, cleaning up that code, and now we've decided we're not really going to do 3D. So what that means is we'll be doing 2D tiles of everything. And so when you go down, you'll really be doing a Binding of Isaac go down, where it teleports you down, right? And so in order to do that, we're going to want to change the world generator to not really use a Z. And so that's the one thing that I want to do coming up next. Before doing that, because I know that I want to do so, I would like to be able to have these tiles light up. And right now, I don't actually think that I have a way to say that one of these is self-illuminating, right? You know what I'm saying to you? So I don't actually know if we have a way to do that, and I would like to do that, right? So that's the main thing that I want to do, is make sure that I can do that, because I know that I need to use that. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to go into the system and figure out what has to happen. It's really an input side issue. I don't think the lighting system cares particularly much, but when the lighting system is basically parsing what gets sent down to it, that is really the thing that I wanted to fix, right? And so what I'd like to do is make sure that that can be sent down, and then after that we'll move on. And I don't know if we probably won't finish. We might finish the lighting thing today, but we don't think we'll quite probably have enough time to start the world gen stuff. But that's our agenda. So there you go. Also, at some point, we need to turn off lighting. This is going through the the lighting system, which is not good, right? Our cutscene is going to look like absolute garbage, because it's going through the whole thing with lighting and filmic response curves and stuff, but these were already balanced, so that is, we probably need a way to turn that off at some point. It's not a high priority right now, but yeah, that's not that is not looking good, right? Not great, guys. So anyway, if we look at what happens in the lighting system when we need to send down the information for how lights are working, we currently have in the renderer, the primitives we have, I think, are just not really going to encode this, I think. I'm not really sure, but when we actually send down, because it's been a long time, right? We only work on things very sporadically on Handmade Hero, so it's it's not really in my head most of the time. So when we actually send stuff down, we've got this sort of, we basically have this render, it's not really command buffer per se, it's sort of a command buffer light. And we just kind of send down, what we're going to be doing. I guess I actually split that off now that I think about it. Did I not? Yeah. So in here, you can see, I actually split it off from the platform API because it's its own thing now. But you can see on here that we have like this sort of render group that we use to submit things, and it basically fills out one of these render entry textured quad things, right? And the render entry texture quad thing is really what draws everything. It's a quad count, and it has vertices and indices, and it says what the textures are that are going to be used. You know what I'm saying? And that's really how the entire thing works. The vertex array offset, right? The vertices that are being sent down, they are the thing that encode like the variance, like the color variability, right? And so in here, the first thing I don't really know is what we did. So somewhere we actually do have something that allows us to do stuff that's lit, right? And like stuff that doesn't respond to lighting. That's like doesn't respond to lighting is kind of the wrong word. We must be sending down something that allows you to sort of self-illuminate, because that's presumably how the cutscenes are working, right? Meaning when you go to the handmade cutscene thing, and this is sending down whatever kind of quads, it's sending down. I believe that what's happening here, like when we do push bitmap, is like we're encoding something that says you don't need to light this thing. Or it shouldn't just be lit normally. And so that's the thing, we have to go see what we did there. I'm guessing it has something to do... Well, the alpha parameter we actually used. So I don't know. It must just be something we do for the entire set. Like if you don't turn lighting on. Or something like that, right? So let's go take a look and see if we can reverse engineer what the heck we did there. Because I'm assuming we just it turns off for the entire thing or something like that. So let's take a look. So when we're actually rendering these command buffers that we send through, pretty much everything goes through this, as far as I know. We only, we basically just have one big batch. And that's it. We've got some of the things here, like, we've got these depth peels and stuff that we do, but everything that we actually render just goes through this one path. It's this path right here, where it just says, like, all right, send down all these vertices and go to town. You know what I'm saying? This one we use for cutscene stuff. This one we use for, like, texture arrays. You know what I'm saying? As I blow my nose. So what we need to do now is figure out what we want to use here for an indication that something should be self-illuminating. And it looks like the lighting is always sent down here. That's the actual updated lighting. And then in terms of whether it's turned on or not, I don't see anything here that indicates that it gets turned on or not, though. So that's a little confusing. So, yeah, again, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what's going on there. So let's take a look at the shader. What gets sent to the shader? So in the shader, I mean, there's not much there, right? The inputs Aha. So there is one float 32 called vertex emission. Vertex emission comes down through to frag emission. So we are actually sending this down, or we claim to be, and maybe we added it to the shader but didn't actually send it down. That's possible. Although the fact that the cutscenes appear to be self-illuminating would suggest that maybe we do. So that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that question. Anyway, so if we look at where does frag emission actually get used? Okay, so what happens is we take the surface reflectance and we pretend that if the frag emission is sent down as, basically it's sent down as a linear interpolant between whatever the lighting actually is at this point and full bright. So I guess that makes sense. I'm fine with that. Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. So the problem, though, is that we kind of have two things we're trying to do here. One is emission. One is emission that is trying to be like for the one is trying to be like the cutscene emission, and the other is if we just want like an actual light that is in the world. And the reason that I say that we kind of have two different things is an emissive source should come from the same pipeline as the rest of the world rendering, so that it will go through the filmic response curve, right? But a cutscene piece should not. And so the question is, do we want to try and have like a... Do we want to try and have this be more of just a switch? Like, hey, there's two different things you can do here. And honestly, I think that might be the right tack. So there's a couple of things that we have to think about. One is, are we ever going to want textured self-illumination? Normally, the answer would always be yes, but in this case, because we don't really do complicated art in this game, it's kind of an art minimal sort of game, I don't know that we're ever going to do that, because that would require having some kind of an art processing pipeline where we actually have a way of producing information like that, like normal maps and self-illumination, all that garbage, right? So I don't know that the input is ever going to be there for self-illumination, which would mean that it would be a waste of time to do textured self-illumination. And if there isn't going to be textured self-illumination, then it suggests that really all we have is we're trying to light something up uniformly. The whole thing, whatever it is, lights up together, right? And if that was the case, you can see why I'm considering this. If that's the case, then you could just have frag emission could just tell us one of two things. It could say either we want to do emission through the ACS film curve, or it could say we want to do emission that's just like cutscene. It's just direct. So I don't know which one of those we want to do. I don't know. So where do we specify this? Let's talk about that. Let's work backwards and say, what do we actually want to do here? So someone's supposedly submitting Fragamizion, right? Someone is pushing down Fragamizion, and we presumably want to go see what the heck Fragamizion is even encoded as, or how it's encoded. It's coming in as an F32. So the quads, do we have, like, here it is, textured vertex. So we have a U8 for Emizion, and then we have a reserved element that's getting transferred anyway. So I guess that's another thing we could do, is just send down a different thing, which is like, what output curve you wanted. All right. Do we want that? I mean, maybe we just do that. You know, I mean, we've already got that in there. So maybe we just have another one. So we have Fragamizion, and then we also have, besides Emizion, we also have frag mapping or something, right? Or fragtone. I like the phrase fragtone because it sounds cool. Right? So we could say that we just have this thing called fragtone, and it comes in to the vertex shader as another input, and it just gets passed through, right? And that's it. Presumably, if I run this thing now, presumably it would just work, because it's not doing anything, right? So, you know, it shouldn't be a problem. And then in the cutscene stuff, like, yeah, I mean, part of the problem is we don't know how that gets sent down. We got issues. So we're gonna have to go look at how we're specifying the Emizion value to begin with, because if we don't actually know how the Emizion is being specified, then I'm assuming it's just something that's set in the render group and gets slapped onto each vertex as a thing. So let's take a look at this. So when we come in here and we're going to do the processing of the actual, the whole, like, we should probably move shaders to separate text files because this whole indentation thing is a nightmare.com, my new web startup. Very promising Series A, by the way. Very promising. I am starving right now, by the way. Can I just tell you that? I'm hungry and I want lunch, but I want to do this first. I had a shot of espresso and a Nature Valley registered trademark oat biscuit for breakfast. And now I'm hungry again. And I would like to eat. Right? That reminds me of another time that I will not describe because it would go into a very long rant. And that rant is going to wait for another day. It's going to wait for another day when I really unload. It's probably going to be like a produced rant. It's one of those things where, see, here's the thing, and this is true, you can count on this. Like, I never forget, like on the grudge side of things, it's actually very hard to piss me off, But once I have been pissed off, it will never end, right? That's kind of the way it goes. Like if I'm just complaining about something, that's fine and I'll move on, right? But if I actually feel like I got pissed off about something for real, I never forget. So there's things that, like, 15 years ago or something, I will remember, and it's like, it's not over. You may think it's over because I'm just not dealing with that thing right now. It's been, like, filed. But if you think it's over, you're really mistaken about that, right? Like, there's only a few of these. There's only going to be like 5 of these in history, right? Because it's actually really hard. I think one of the nice things about people who complain about stuff or think everything sucks is it's actually kind of hard to piss them off, right? Because they're already not in a state where they think everything's going well, right? So, they're just, yeah, this is another crap thing. Yeah, this all sucks. Yeah, that's it, right? You move on. It's fine. But if someone actually pushes me to the point where I'm really pissed off in the real way, it never gets forgotten. So it's still there, right? And it's just like, yep, like someday when I'm 72 and you thought it was over, oh, my friend, it is not over. So anyway, that said about breakfast biscuits, especially I was thinking about a Power Bar. But yeah, I need to eat something because we have probably low blood sugar at this point. It's chat. It is like opposite Buddhist, right? I'm the anti-Buddhist. It's because I'm Italian, right? I don't want to be racist about it. I mean, I don't want to be racist against myself, right? I guess, which is what I'd be doing. But I mean, do you really think we have a history of letting things go? Is that, if you looked at the history of like Sicily or something, would you go like, now there's a group of people who really know how to just like let the past be the past? Yeah. You think so? No. Doesn't really happen. Oh, no, Ryan, I love the 4-coder layer. I'm very happy you did that. It totally saved my bacon, because I don't want to use my stuff, the Molly proprietary stuff I don't do on stream, and it would have been really tough if you hadn't have made the 4-coder flurry layer. It was a lifesaver. You could piss me off many times, right? And like you're banked already, right? Like, what am I going to do? You totally saved my bacon already. You know what I'm saying? Same with Alan, same with George. I mean, you guys all totally saved my bacon. I mean, I can't I can't get pissed off, right? There's nothing I could get pissed off about, because it's like, well, all right, they already did you a solid. How are you going to get pissed off at them? All right, anyway, so this is the situation that we have here, where we've got a lerp where we're using like the fog, we've got a fog coefficient, we've got the emission coefficient, and what we're basically doing here, right, is we're using these lerps to basically create knobs, like producer knobs, right, where you turn up the X, whatever X is, if you're trying to get that effect for these pixels, or you turn it down, right? So you want more fog, you turn that up. You want more emission, you turn that up. Sorry, emission. You turn that up. And so I just don't know what exactly these all should be, but I do think this is a reasonable guess, is like, okay, turn up the tone mapping, turn up the emission, turn up the fog. That'll give us the way that we can like tune for cutscene, light source, right? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so in here, you can see that this is the part where we're actually doing the tone mapping, right? The fog is, we had that in there. It wasn't really, fog per se. It was kind of so that we could fade out like lower levels, And so right now it's a little bit hard to say where that should be. you know, in terms of these other parameters, you know, does it happen before or after emission? Does it you know, where is this actually going? And that's kind of a little bit tough to determine. So I'm not really sure what we want to do here exactly. That's a little bit tough. So what I might say is, all right, we've got the emission coefficient coming down. That's turning this, it's saying how much you want to crank all the way to full bright, right, which is 111. And we then multiply the reflectance color that comes in by that always. So if it's an emitter, we're basically saying, oh, and by the way, the emitter also will always take the color that you give it. So if you wanted to have a yellow emission, right, that's fine too. But once we get to here, you know, maybe we would say fog is still always applied, because it would seem to reason that you would do that, right? Also, I don't know why we probably had this in here when that was still a 4. It doesn't have to do that anymore. I also don't know why fog would be in RGBA, probably because it's an input, but you know, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so when we come through here, this will compute, I think, correctly most of the time. This would compute, no matter what we set the other knob to, this would compute the base value that we actually want. So really all we're trying to do here is this part is the part that we need to fix, because this part is not, we don't want that to happen, right? So in here, we've got this like film map curve thing, and so I'm going to say let's call this like mapped or mapped color. So what I'm thinking is we just say, we compute this as a completely separate value now. So it doesn't affect the actual like unmapped, like unfilm mapped color that, you know, this one here. We compute it in a completely separate variable. And then when we want to produce our final surface reflection, and maybe we could actually call this like something different, like final color or something like that. So we produce the surface reflect, we produce the mapped color, and then we say, well, the final color is going to be yet another lerp between the surface reflection color, which is the pure color that hasn't gone through the curves or the boost, the light amplification. We're going to use that frag tone mapping to just say, how much tone mapping do you want? Now, again, this seems like kind of unnecessary because it's really mostly just going to be a 0 or a 1. But because everything else was done on a dial, I mean, sure, right? I don't know. So anyway, I'm just saying, look, we'll just lerp up to the mapped color, right? Now, I believe that the default value for this thing will always be 0 because we haven't set it to anything. So I'm imagining that if we actually run this, we will get, yeah, like we'll just get the untoned mapped version of this thing is what we'd end up with, right? And if we hit escape, because again, it's set to 0, which means don't go through the curve, our cutscene is now okay. Right? Like, at the edge of the wood, there was an orphanage that catered to a group of limbless children. They were very sad, because without any limbs they could not play outside or adventure into the forest, for there were many demons there, and without arms to defend themselves, there was no way they would survive. This little grumpy boy that we see through the window here is one of the orphans. He's going to be the hero later, but we don't know that. One of them was constantly playing with toys. and imagining what it would be like if he could go into the forest and fight the demons there. In particular, little pink Godzilla for some reason, and I won't go into it, just what he thought of. Every year at Christmas time, Santa Claus, who is a tremendous dick, came and gave them a hat because he had no better idea of what to give people who had no arms and legs. The kids didn't like it, but Santa didn't care because he's callous and imperceptive. But one year, in the midst of a brutal storm, who should arrive but Krampus, with his giant tongue meant for licking naughty children and dismembering them to put in his sack. The children were scared, of course, because they knew that the arrival of Krampus could only mean one thing. And that thing was that they would soon be dismembered for being naughty, which of course they were. However, on this particular day, the little child who always dreamed of adventuring into the forest looked up at Krampus and said, "No! I will stand between you and these poor children. You will not terrorize them, and you will not dismember them. For they have no arms and legs anyway. What could you possibly gain from this?" And Krampus was so moved by the small child's gesture that out of his sack he took a tiny glove, sparkling with magic, capable of moving on its own, and he presented it to the child, who looked at the hand in wonder. Now, it only took the child a brief moment to decide exactly what he would do, for with this hand he could now finally go adventuring in the forest, for all he needed was just a little bit of help to hold a sword, or perhaps just a box. And of course he already had a complete selection of hats given to him by Santa Claus across the many years, so all that remained was for him to select one, the correct hat for his journey, put it on his head, and prepare for the adventure of a lifetime. Alright, so anyway, there you go, cutscene's working. Oh, yeah, no, this game is going to have so many hats in it. It's going to be like the only thing that you can buy with real money in the real money auction house is going to be hats. Right? It's going to be Portal 2 times 2 plus 2 minus 1. So. Why, thank you for the sub-gifting. That was very nice of you. Was that because of my amazing narration? Is that what your way of saying that you do think that my career as a voice actor is just waiting to take off? Is that what that benevolent gesture was meant to say? I can only really interpret it that way. I mean, how else could I interpret it? Right after that dramatic, moving reading. Well, I wasn't really reading anything, but, if I had been, it would have been dramatic, certainly. I think we all know. So, Okay. So, anyway, I think honestly, I think that was basically it. Like, that was what we wanted to accomplish on the stream, besides the reading. Yeah, my posh British accent it may not be terrible, but the problem is it's probably not a British accent, right? It's probably like a weird combination of British accents. What I need is one of those like accent coaches who's like, okay, like which part of England are we talking about here? Or which part of Great Britain are we talking about? Like what accent are we actually doing? You gotta pick one, right? Because I don't really know the actual accents. That's the problem. So gotta get a voice coach. Gotta get an accent coach. Gotta call Hollywood. All right. So what we need to do now is just utilize this variable so that we can turn up the tone mapping or off the tone mapping and all that sort of stuff at the appropriate times. Now, I think that the lighting stuff is already it has the ability to turn it on and off, and that's how we're bracketing those things. So I assume that it's just part of the render group at the moment, and it's just kind of getting like stuffed into those. Oops, I'm in the wrong file. You're not gonna fix anything in the wrong file, son. You're not gonna fix anything in the wrong file. So I'm pretty sure there's like a lighting like switch. Yeah. So you can see like we've kind of got a kill switch for lighting here. And so when lighting is enabled, we need to turn up the tone mapping curve, right? You can see we got push occluder, we got push and vertices, all this stuff, right? So here's our push quad. And inside push quad, you can see that if the lighting is not enabled, we set the emission to 1 automatically. So I think what we need to also do here is set the tone mapping to the opposite of that, right? So vert emission goes in here, and we need to specify, as well as that, we need to specify tone, right? Did we probably didn't actually set that, did we? Tone. Maybe store it here. That's a great comment. Maybe store it here. So I wrote a comment. I thought, as I've said, comments are usually pretty useless because you won't say what you actually need to say and they'll get out of sync with the code and stuff. So, I try to do comments pretty specifically, right? What the heck did I think I was right? Maybe store it here? How is that helpful? Why did I stop to type that comment? If you don't know what it is, how are you going to know if you should maybe store it there? What is that? How is that helping? How is that helping? Maybe store it here. Thanks, Fermat, for that theorem. I'll get right on it. No. All right. Oh, jeez. So, yeah. Maybe store... Yeah, maybe we will. In fact, we did store something there and left the comment, so that's good, right? Oh, so hey, Ryan, people do that with Handmade Hero. If you go onto the Handmade Hero GitHub right now, it's got line attribution. So it will tell you which episode I made the comment in on the Handmade Hero GitHub, actually. It actually has that feature. Andrew JDR made it. Andrew Johnson, do you know who he is? He does that like asset management system, that web-based like fast asset management thing for movie people. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know if you know who he is. Yeah, him. He made a like script that just like automatically, whenever the GitHub gets checked in, it produces like a new version of the source code that has each line, it says when it was made. It's really cool. So totally, it would be great if that was just built into the system. Because the source code control system knows that, right? It knows when you did it. And of course, since with this with each check-in I include a day number, so it knows that's all it really needs, right? So anyway, so if we have our vert emission here, then it should be pretty easy to just produce a vert tone value. And again, this is being pretty sloppy, because really, if we were fancy GPU people, we would split these into streams that had different run rates, right? So because we know that we only need to specify a few things for the quad, like the quad only needs a couple of these, we never change, for example, the texture index, the emission, or the tone per vertex. So those could have gone in a different stream. And in that different stream, we would then set it to only advance every 4 vertices, right? Or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And so we're being sort of flippant here, and the reason for that is we're just not sending down very much geometry. So because we're not sending down very much geometry, we can get away with being sloppy here. All of our GPU load goes on the fill rate side of things. The geometry is like totally irrelevant. So we can be pretty much as sloppy as we want here because we are never going to stress the vertex shader. If we were thinking we would be in a situation where we would be putting pressure on the vertex shader, you would not do this, right? So it's just worth noting, like, you know, these don't actually need to be sent down per vertex because they don't change per vertex ever. Like, we never actually use that feature. So the vert tone is really, at this point, I don't think we need to support gradual anything with it. So I'm pretty sure we can just say that, you know, the vert tone mapping is just going to be 255, and then if you're turning off lighting, then it's not. I think that's basically all there is to it, right? All right. Well, I would have thought that would have worked. Did I pick it? Did I do it the wrong way? Or is our shader busted? Oh! We didn't bind it. We didn't actually bind that. Oopsie poopsies. Yeah, like we don't actually, we are sending it down sort of, but not actually telling the card. It's right in the stuff that the card will pull down, but we never told the card about it. So whoops. Slight mistake. Huge tiny mistake. Okay, so that emission, that vert emission that we claim is coming in here, yeah, you can see it, right? So what we need here is we need a tone poem, and we need to enable that tone poem, like so. And we probably have a few places where that's going to want to get right in begin and end. This is all just garbage. Like, this is why I hate GPU. All of this is stupid. You should never have to do any of this stuff. This is just, GPU programming is terrible, and it's always sucks, and it's just this nonsense. If you spend a lot of time doing this, you can make these things be more system oriented, meaning you can go in here and make your own like little system for like, okay, bound arrays, or I have a meta program that scans it and produces the correct. It's all so dumb. It's all so dumb, right? And the other thing you can do is, if you're targeting higher levels of GLSL than I think we are, a smarter thing to do here is I think you can finally now say that we're going to define just like a struct in the shader, so that you don't have to do this stupid stuff. So I don't think you have to, it's not as bad as this is making it seem, is I guess what I would say. So, you can nowadays be a little bit less handholdy, I think. You know what, as I say that, I think I checked recently and you still couldn't for vertex arrays. Am I wrong about that? Hey, GPU people out there, do they still not have it so you can just say the vertices are this struct? Because I feel like, you know what, I did check that recently and it still wasn't something that you could do in standard GPU, in standard APIs. Botondar, I don't think that's true. I mean, it's true on the GPU, but it's not true in the API. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're absolutely right that in like an NVIDIA GPU, I'm pretty sure that it's just complete arbitrary fetch for the most part, right? Um, but I think like like if you fire up Direct 3D 11 most modern version, or OpenGL most modern version, you can't do that. I think you still have to specify each array manually. I don't know if D3D12 might have it. Somebody check that, because I remember being surprised. I was like, we're still doing this? And I think the answer was yes, we often are still doing this. And I was like, God, all right. You can D3D12 structure. Are you sure? Are you sure you can do it for vertices? Meaning a vertex shader can use structured buffer. I'm slightly doubtful. I apologize for being a doubting Thomas. Let's say doubting Nancy. But I'm not sure I quite believe you, because I feel like I looked at this and you couldn't do it for that case. You can do other things structured. You can send down arbitrary structured buffers that you fetch from in the vertex shader, but not for the actual vertex parameters by default that come in. Okay, yeah, so that's what I thought. So, but can you actually still get the full performance by using the vertex ID to do the indexing, or does that create, like, I assumed that you wouldn't want to do that because it would create, like, performance issues for, older cards or something. I don't know. Like, I assumed that you didn't want to bypass the standard vertex shading, but maybe you can. Can you safely do that? I'd be very curious to know. All right. So that looked like that worked well. There's our tone mapping is back. Here's our cutscene. Looks right again. So I guess the other thing we might want to do is verify that this works, and it does. Oh, lovely. So our debug view works again too, right? Because that had a problem with the new lighting. So that with the tone mapping. So that's all good. Great. Fantastic. So that seems good. I am a swanky Sally about that. And I guess the only thing that remains is to actually try making the self-illuminating block now. And to make sure that we can actually send it down. You know what I'm saying to you? I guess... So in the world gen code, so I think that's all I really need to do. We'll just say that first. So let's just go ahead and ping pong over to the world gen code and see if we can make our dungeon area here. We know we've have it all. Any Lemon Grab fans in the audience? Anyone? Lemon Grab? Any Lemon Grab fans out there? Got any Lemon Grab? Does anybody out there in the audience know who Lemon Grab is? There's my people. This code base is in unacceptable condition. Unacceptable! Yeah. the interesting thing about the autofocus on the Sony cameras is that it's almost like too good. It has facial recognition in it that focuses on faces by default, which I guess you could turn off, and maybe I should. But so as a result, it's always going to focus on your face. So if you try to hold something up, you're like, look at this thing in front of the camera. It's like, no, I'm going to look right past that at the face that I see. So you have to like actually like obscure your face first. I think. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's sort of what happens on there. So, you know. Anyway. In keeping with our... So, the question is, what do we want to do in the world generator for, like, how rooms get connected? If we're going to start saying, like, oh, yeah, like, you know, up and down is not in here anymore. Do we want to still have up and down in here and just it, like, puts it somewhere else and then, like, connects it with a teleporter? Or do we want to just not talk about up and down at all? You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. I mean, for now, I guess we just... I don't know. Just do that. So I don't really know what this is going to do, but I wanted to get the dungeon in here because if we want to, like, I think we already had the concept of these little tiles that I wanted, right? Ooh, that's... Oh! Well, would you look at that little saucy salamander? Look at that. Interesting. So what happened there is when we were putting in the vertices for our greeble, we never put, like, those are obviously getting, they're the cover, you know, the sort of like ground cover. Those are obviously not pushing a value. How did those actually get output? I don't even know what we did here. I mean, you can see us doing a thing with p values here, but I don't know. I don't know what that supposedly does. So it's using vertex out, which, oh, we just specifically said doesn't have tone mapping. So I don't know what we want here. Like, we could auto stuff this value, and then this would be fixed. I don't know if we want control over that. Probably not, because anytime we're, like, putting those down, it did not fix the blocky lighting bug. You just couldn't see it because nothing was reflecting the light. Right? But anyway, okay, so I think we'll just stuff that value for now, because I don't know that we're ever going to need that function in that way. All right, so in the dungeon areas here, yeah, like, I think we already had this stuff set up. Oh, these stupid guys. Yeah, we gotta do some monster coding. It's got to the point. So the dungeon's looking good. So that all worked fine. That connecting worked fine. I assume dungeon to dungeon connection doesn't. We can't actually kill any of these guys, so that's a problem. Because they're going to keep blocking our path. But I assume then when we get out here, the dungeons are now going to actually still have a downward connection, right? So we'd have to fix that. Oh my god, there's too many of these stupid guys. Stop. No, get out of here. All right, yeah. So, like, we still have some downward dungeon connect. Downward dungeon, actually, by the way, sounds great. Like, someone needs to make a game. Someone needs to make a game called Downward Dungeon. Can someone please make a game called Downward Dungeon? Like, the next time there's one of those game jams where you're only gonna spend like 48 hours or whatever it is that they do, can someone please make a game called Downward Dungeon? If someone is willing to make a game called Downward Dungeon for a game jam, I will do some of that voice acting for free. I will send you some voice acting for Downward Dungeon. Like, I will narrate the introductory sequence to Downward Dungeon. Okay? Like, let it not be said that I do not support the Downward Dungeon project. I mean, they made there was a game literally called like Darkest Dungeon or something, right? And it was super popular. Like, it made a ton of money. Like hundreds of thousands of copies, million copies, something like that, right? And it was literally just called like Darkest Dungeon, I think. And so Downward Dungeon, do not tell me Downward Dungeon could not be a huge game. I think Downward Dungeon could be big. Right? So, Downward Dungeon. You know what I'm saying? Downward Dungeon, people. Okay. In order to restore light to the darkness, they knew they would have to go downward into the Downward Dungeon. I mean, at this point, I would say I would accept most slightly off dungeon names as a project. Like I would be willing to do some voice acting for like mildly, like if there was a game called like Mildly Ominous Dungeon or somewhat like or a game called Slightly Dungeon. Or a game called Just the Outskirts of Hell. Like, this game is just barely hell. Like, we're just outskirts of hell. But not ever actually going into hell, because that would be dangerous. Yeah. I'm just saying, I know there's people out there who do these game jams and stuff. I'm just saying, Downward Dungeon, okay? I agree that a game about traveling to the dungeon and then deciding not to go in because it just looks a little bit too dangerous would be great. Like, I mean, basically, like, the Monty Python thing of, like, Brave Sir Robin ran away, right? The game. I don't know how you make that a game. Maybe the game can just be called Where is the Dungeon? Like the whole game is just trying to find the dungeon, and you don't. It's very like It's very like difficult to find. Or maybe the game could just be called What Dungeon? Where's the dungeon would be, dude, where's my dungeon? Yeah. I really like this idea. Technibeam, that's a great idea. I like that idea. I like that you made that. All right. Yeah, like what if you're basically going around, so this game this game is just called Dungeon but with a question mark, and basically like you're a bunch of heroes that show up to a town that's like giving you all these NPC quests, like, oh, it stole my cow, and the dragon has been menacing us. But you sort of start to get the feeling like there's no evidence that any of these things ever happened, right? And like it turns out at the end of the game that really it's just the villagers just wanted like heroes to come to the village, so it's completely fictional. Like they made it all up. There's no dragon, there's no dungeon. They're completely full of it, right? Like, oh, well, actually, so if it wasn't already trademarked, the obvious name for this game would be Imagine Dragons, right? You know? So, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that they don't really make much sci-fi fantasy comedy. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that they totally should have made. Like, someone should make a movie about this town that's like struggling. Like all the peasants are like really unable, like they can't feed their families and it's really bad. And like somebody gets the idea to like attract a bunch of heroes by pretending that something like momentous has happened there, like pretending there's like a Lord of the Rings style like big grand thing happening, but they completely fabricate it. It's not actually true. And like it's, the standard kind of like rom-com kind of movie, right? Like where they're just trying to pull it off and they almost do but sort of don't, but then we all learn to work together in the end, whatever. So Kindly Sloth, there sort of is a game like that, a tycoon-style game. It's not quite... It doesn't have that humor part of it, unfortunately. But there is a game made by, like... There's this company that has, like, this one little, like, pixel engine for, like, management sims. And they ship... Like, if you go on, like, the PlayStation Store, they literally have shipped, like, 20 games that are all exactly the same, but they're just, like, rebranded. Like, they just keep, like, changing the underlying thing. And one of them is that. You create a town for adventurers, and adventurers show up, and then they go out and they fight in a dungeon, and they come back, and, like, you build things like an inn for them, or, an armory and whatever, right? And, so it doesn't have the humor part, unfortunately, but it almost is the game you're talking about, just minus the humor, right? I actually think it's a good idea for a game. I just don't think they made a very interesting game out of it. But anyway. All right, yeah. So someone out there, like these are all gems. These are just like golden gems we're dropping here. Gems aren't gold. It's all right. Dave made a dungeon. Yeah. All right, I'll stop thinking about that. Okay, so what we want to do here is in the generator nonsense, which probably just needs to be improved dramatically, which is what we were going to do next anyway, so that's all fine. We had a thing, I think, in here that generated the little floor tiles and other garbage like that. And I believe so it's this is it. This tile switch pattern thing. And we must have turned it off somehow. Yeah. So for some reason we turned it off, probably because we were doing stuff. Yeah. Baby's first dungeon would also be a pretty good one. So I probably need to do the thing where we start the hero so we don't have to like walk out through the orphanage thing every time. But for the time being, for the brief moment, if we walk out to where the things are, there should be switches now. Maybe. Yeah. So here's a bunch of random garbage in, right? Like these switches and stuff. And the idea was like, as they like, oh God. Well, hey guys, we found a place where we didn't set the light values to be less than 1. Wow, that looks pretty cool, actually. So these are the things that I actually wanted to, those little switches is what I wanted. I don't really remember much about how we decided to light them. I think we create a light above them, which, like I said, is not really what I wanted. I don't actually want to create a new light there anymore. So I want to change the way that's being done. And also, got to keep those light values under 1. So that's not quite going to cut it. You can see here us adding the light, it's off. And then my assumption is in the brain, when it gets stepped on, I assume it's in the brain. Does it get execute brain switches? Yeah, there it is. I assume it turns on the light and it turns it on like like not an acceptable light level of 10. 1 is probably still way too bright. But, at least then it wouldn't feed back, presumably. And let's put the hero up near that stuff when it starts so we don't have to keep walking up there. Because unfortunately, hot code reloading doesn't work with the world gen. Maybe it should, because obviously, the hot code reloading, it keeps the world that you're currently in. That's kind of the point of it. But, maybe we should just have a button so that we can regen the world anytime we want, so that if we hot reload changes to world gen, we hit a button and it says, hey, yeah, regenerate this world because we want to see the thing we changed. We want to see what it does. We may need something like that. But anyway. So when the hero gets placed in the world, I think we can just say, probably that. Maybes. Yeah. So what you can see here is, it's not very good what's happening. It's like putting lights above the thing, and it's not, that's not at all what you want. So we're going to start with a couple tweaks here just so we can start working on getting this lighting to be correct. Instead of what it actually is, which is the opposite of that, right? So the first thing is, I think I want to say, and I'm probably lying, I want to say we don't need to add a light at all. Because our system is global illumination now and works pretty well, I want to say we can just set the emission of the cube, and when it gets pushed into the system, it will just be set up as an occluder that's a light source, I think. Right? Is the light never going away? Yeah, those lights don't go away. They get set, they permanently turn on. So I think these light pieces just don't need to be there. Here's the question. Does Downward Dungeon need a theme song? I feel like it does. Like, I'm imagining something like the Top Gun theme, but where someone is singing the words Downward Dungeon along with it. You know what I'm talking about? First time chat. All right, so I'm just gonna vote for we don't actually do this. So like this is not a thing. And so now, like when we hop over these, they turn on, and they do not add any lighting. And we also should remove our lighting because we're not really supposed to have a light. I mean, sort of we can do a little bit of that, but we mostly right now have like sort of almost like debug lighting in there for the stuff attached to us, and we don't really want that. I do suspect that the glove should glow. Like, that is true. But I don't actually... I don't actually want it to be particularly bright, and, you know, this 0.1 as a light might even be too bright. So we'll see. Like, that might be a bit much, you know? Like it's not really supposed to be a light source per se. I mean, maybe it is in a completely, like, the darkest of dark rooms, but it just feels like, oh, hi. Way to change a value that's not even in play. But yeah, you know. So I think that, yeah, like, that looks a little bit more like it to me. So, like, if you're in a completely dark room, right, it should be more like that, you know? I also think these should be stone face, which they are not. Of course, I don't remember at all how you make something stone face, so there is that. My assumption is that is just something that's set on the entity piece where it's going to be this asset tag. So I assume that in here, like, this asset tag wants to be set to the stonework. I mean, eventually it wants to be set to the actual switch tile, which nobody has drawn. So, you know, there's that. But that's what we actually want. So when these get added here, like the stone floor stuff, I don't know where this happens exactly, but in tile material, you can kind of see, yeah, like here. Tile type and tile material. Oh, it's like wall or floor, I see. So all we really need here is to just say, we're gonna for now switch it to this other thing. Really, we should have our own, like we would like what, not flowers. We would like something that's specific to being a switch, but at the moment we don't have that, so we'll just leave it as it is. But this way, they're cleaner because they're not like wood switches. You know, that wouldn't light up. It doesn't look anything like something that would light up. So that looks a little bit better, right? And so now what we want to do is make those like actually emit light instead of just their color brightening when you step on them. You know what I'm saying to you? Yeah, I don't know what's up with the 4-coder project. No one has told me, actually. So I don't even know what's up with it. Is it like going to be like open sourced and kind of like abandoned or like pooted forth to the community, or is the plan that someday it will get started again, or what? I have no idea like what the idea is. Behind it. I really don't know. Oh, this dude came in. God, one of the problems of having like no real like. One of the problems of having your maps actually be real maps is that if the AI is not artificially constrained to stay in one place, it can go wherever it wants. Did one of the heads face through a wall? Yes, right now the collision detector is turned off completely. Because we were doing some stuff with it, it's not turned on. So any floating entity can go straight through a wall if it wants to. Probably we won't even do floating entities that way. We'll probably make them have to use the other way of doing things, where they actually occupy tiles. But at the moment, those guys are basically Considered projectiles, which means they are allowed to just phase straight through walls if they want to. So like, here's the thing though, now that I think about it, I do think they do require a accessible square. They do check though whether they're allowed to move in a square. So now that I think about it, what I said isn't totally true. Their flight path, like they can go straight through the wall, if they're going between two squares that they could move between, but I guess technically they can't phase directly through the wall that way. But like my point is that if I took this curve tight, it can like if I go fast enough, it could go through the wall like that, right? As long as it's moving through like to a space it could actually occupy, I think it can. While the collision detector is turned off. So it's not quite as free as I originally described. So oh, okay. So 4-coder is going to be open source. That's kind of cool because I have access to the source code right now because it's a couple of things I wanted to fix, like the clipboard thing. And so if it was open source, I think I would contribute some stuff to it when we come across stuff on stream like that. Just to get it into a good like finishing state, because we'll keep using it on stream. So, you know. So the biggest problem for us here is just going to be the self-illumination stuff, because that is not currently in our vocabulary, right? In other words, the biggest obstacle to our success is that in here you can see like the flag stuff. And so if you set these like cube light occluder, how we were getting light sources before is we set this flag. And the problem is that those lead to like separate switches. You know what I'm saying? So our problem is really just the encoding of that. And how do we want to actually represent that? Because when we go then to look at entity output code, you can see, I'll be more specific. You can see here that like it's going to pick one of these. But what we actually want it to do is this while sending down self-illumination. And in fact, it looks like emission is actually something you can send down. Does that mean if I set this to 1, like all our cubes become lit? Lit cube, bro. All right. So if that's true, then really all we're talking about is a way to set this emission value, right? And if we can set that emission value, then we don't really need to change anything. We just, we just need to be able to have the code that was previously messing with the light source nonsense. We're just making this, we're just going to set the emission instead. That's it. Okay. Well, stretching. I mean, I'm not sure what we want to do here, but we could do a like alpha is emission. Or we could just make this thing bigger. I don't know. What the heck is cube UV layout even defined as? So bitmap piece is 32-bit, and cube U layout is U16. So actually, we could keep this the same size and just say that when you're in the cube UV layout path, there's actually an emission value in there, right? Like a 16-bit emission value. That's pretty straightforward. Because 16 bits is more than we would actually need anyway. So we could do something where we just did like this. And then put an emission value in there. Like we could have both of those two things in there, you know? Yeah. All right, so let's pack an emission value in there and see what that does for us. We also don't need to call it cube UV layout anymore because that's obvious. All right, so there we go. And now we just need to use that emission value. In here. So what we need to do is unpack the emission value, and this is dumb. But sometimes we are dumb. I won't quote Frank Zappa in the interest of keeping the stream family friendly, but you're welcome to look up Dumb All Over, I believe is the song name. Let's go ahead and try this. Since no one right now should be setting that value, we should be fine. There should be no emission cubes. And I don't see any, so that seems good. And now, if we go into the brains of the operation, and we look at the this garbage, in theory, we can just say that now the emission of this thing is going to go up to some number. And I don't know what number it's going to be. I have no idea. I don't have a sense yet because we only just did the lighting system. How bright a bright light is. So I don't know. That looks shockingly like it did not do anything. You know, I don't want to be. I don't want to be too bold in my assertion, but you know, it really doesn't. So what happened there? We set the cube emission. It is a piece type cube, I believe. We don't pass the emission. All right, good. Yep, on top of it as always. Really crushing it there. Okay, that's what we wanted. So now we're getting our self-illumination there. And that's all good. So that's good. But it looks to me like we are not sending that down to the light system, though. Because, like, over here, there's no light. It's self-illuminating properly, but it's not actually telling the lighting system about that self-illumination, right? So what we would prefer here is if we could make it so that when you do a push cube, if the emission is set, it sets the vertices right to the emission. So let's see what's happening here. I'm not setting that's I literally just said a word salad that is not correct. So what I mean to say is the occluder, right? So the occluder should be pushed there. I don't know why I said that. So here's the push cube function. And to be completely honest with you, I don't know how this whole thing works anymore because it's been too long. But somewhere in here, it adds the cube to the occluder set. I mean, it would have to or this entire game wouldn't work. So we know that that's happening. But to tell you the truth, I don't quite see where. Am I the only one who's confused? Right, like in the push cube function, this should have to push an actual occluder on. Maybe it does it. Does it do it in here somewhere that I'm not seeing? I don't see it. Like this, I would have expected this to have to call this, right? To call push occludor so that it would know that this is a thing. Oh, wait. Do you just set both? No, but you couldn't set both because this is an else if clause. So you ain't setting both. Right? That ain't happening. I'm going to have to step through this because, frankly, I just don't remember. Does it add an occluder manually when we generate the room? I mean, is that how we rolled this? I mean, we could have. Right, it's totally possible that that's what happened. So here's the generate room call. There's it adding the cube. There's it adding the light. There's it adding the ceiling occluder. So I guess it really does. No, that's only for trees. So how is it doing this? I think I just assumed this entire time I've been assuming that's how that worked. But I guess I was mistaken. No. It's this code right here. So it looks like we add the occluders manually. So that happened. In here, so is light, I guess, is what we need to deal with here. So what we would want to do, I guess, is say that if the emissive value is non-zero, then we do set it to is light. To be completely honest, I don't know that we really need that. We could presumably just... I mean, the lighting system doesn't really care about that, but what the lighting system does need to know is something an emitter or not, right? So we don't really have a good place for a floating point value here other than to modulate the reference color. So it's like really what you would probably want to do here is you'd want a ref C, and is light would be like an emission C as well. So you don't really have an is light, right? And I don't know if we want to go that far right now, but maybe we do. I don't know, because we kind of know how the lighting works now. We pretty much know what's up, right? And so, you know, if we wanted to, we could just make these be... We could just make that F32 be emission. right? Let's take a Gandor. So that literally is the only place. So yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm gonna suggest we just do this. So now that value is directly controllable. We don't care about the sphere stuff. What do we do with Hidimizion? I mean, these could just be added now. And should be added now. Right? Shouldn't they be added? Shouldn't this be added? Like, Max is a nice guy. Right? I don't want to say anything bad about him, but Max just doesn't seem like the right choice here. Like, if we have a reflected color and we have an emitted color, wouldn't we just add them together? I don't know. We need the rendering equation. We need Jim Kajia's rendering equation. All right, so now these are set to emission, and we can see them, but we would like them to do in the lighting system, and I believe we have fixed that. I believe we have. So that now we should, in fact, I guess we don't even need to restart the game because it's not a startup thing. We should be able to add some code in here so that when you push an occluder, we could more or less just say that there's no difference between pushing a light source and pushing an occluder, right? I think. So here are the two calls, and I think they're exactly the same. Like, there's no difference between these two things. So I think now we can just stop with that and say push a lighting element or something like that. You know what I mean? And then we would just say, like, what's the color and what's the emission. And we would pass the emission through and set the color as suchly. And then in order to do the lighting element thing, like, you'd now just translate the other two calls into whichever one of those you actually wanted. And we could also get rid of the concept that there's a light and an occluder as separate things. I won't just yet, but we certainly can. So let's get rid of some of this stuff and try to clean that up. So if we want to push a lighting element on, all we need now to do is say that the color passes through in the RGBA style, because we encoded the emission in the A value, didn't we? For lights, that's how that worked. And I guess, like I'm saying, we can sort of undo some of that stuff in a little bit here, because now we have an actual emission. We have an actual emission encoding. So then in here, when we're doing a piece type occludor, then we push the same, we call the same function, but we do it slightly differently, where now we're going to pass the emission as 0, right? And we don't have an alpha value. Because, I mean, we never did. That was getting clipped off of there. There's no such thing as alpha in the lighting system. We don't have translucent lighting at the moment. Right? Okay. So I think that's now encoded properly. And the only thing that we didn't do, and of course, it won't do it for the ones I already stepped on. So I guess when I said this wasn't a startup thing, I was sort of lying. The thing we need to actually do is set the occluder's emission, right, to be the, yeah, you know what I'm saying. Well, still don't see any light, so I'm not feeling too good about that. I suppose technically we want them both to be set to an emissive value, because we also want the base one to be. But we don't know which of these is which on here, I suppose, so that's kind of another problem. But when we create those ground elements, yeah, I mean, it should be, I mean, you know, we probably should be a little cleaner about this to make sure that these things line up properly. But if we're at the first one, we'd set the emission here, and the second one, we'd set the emission here. That should have worked. So I'm a little weirded out that it didn't, but we'll check it out. What would translucent lighting even be? Like participating media, right? God rays would be an example of that sort of thing. Water, like murky water. So, like, yeah, like that is not emitting any light in the lighting system, so I think we're still not really sending it down. How much time we got? We have just a few minutes left, so I would say with our few minutes left, big stretch, and we've have it all. I'm not sure. Oh, by the way, you know, the other thing is we have the light leaking problem a little bit, because now we allow that sort of weird kind of sampling to happen. When this guy comes over, you'll see what I mean. Come on over. Come on, guys. There we go. No, it's not coming over. Well, I suppose I can do it, maybe. I mean, I guess it's really not bad enough to worry about. I was going to say, because we now do the thing where we actually do jittered lighting positions, stuff like that, we will have more light leaking, but I guess it's just not bad enough to worry about. Anyway, what I was going to say is we got a little bit of time left. Maybe I'll just step into this code. So we made an emitter, right? And I guess let me actually set myself up for success by going into the code that actually like puts these forth and checking to see when we have an emitted one that has emission in it, you know? So like if emission is greater than 0, oh, hi, I'm still an idiot. Nice work, Casey. That's twice. I did the same thing twice in a row. The first time I was like, oh, that didn't work because I didn't actually pass the value. Second time, oh, that didn't work and I didn't pass the value. How many times are we not going to pass the value? All right, let's double check that that doesn't just work before I go debug the thing. Hey, look, that worked. All right, so we can now turn these lights on, which is fine. And they don't seem to be, the color seems to be off, and I suppose that's probably because we need to set the color of the emitter as well. So we probably want to tweak this, but I would say we did everything we wanted to do today, so I'm happy with that, and we'll pick it up again next weekend. I said today was going to be short, and I wasn't kidding. So, you know. And you can see here why I was saying we should add a glow, we should add a bloom shader. Because, you know, this looks nice and all, but you want to emphasize the fact that it's like a bright light. You want a little bit of a halo effect around it, right? You want a little bit of that blurring out. And so this is why I was saying we want to add a post pass, I think, probably to do that, because it's like for those lit things on the ground, that's really what's going to sell it. You know what I'm saying? But I think we're good. That was it. This may be a bit too bright in terms of emission. Hard to say. That seems better. I would also say we probably have to tone that down a little bit on the ramp. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I want to do today. And like I said, today's got to be a short day. So that's it. I don't really have anything else to say. It worked. Yay. No real tough stuff today. Very simple. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It has been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you do want to play around with stuff yourself, I should always mention you can go to handmadehero.org. And you can pre-order if you want the source code. It comes with source code, which you can build yourself and have a party with. That's about it. You know what I should mention as well? Our movie club is up. The first episode of our movie club is up. Me and Anna do a movie club on Substack. If you like talking about movies, it's a podcast that you might be interested in. Forgot to mention that. I'll mention it next time more prominently. But if you're interested in that, if you like talking about movies, and you're tired of the way people normally talk about movies these days, and you just want people who think about the movie a lot and talk about what's in it, it's for you. All right, that's it. The first movie was Interstellar, by the way, and that's the podcast that's up there right now. It was recommended by the members of the movie club. They said, we're going to do Interstellar, and it was a really fun discussion. I liked talking about Interstellar a lot. So if you want to check it out, check it out. That's where it's at, mollymovieclub.com. Go for it. The question about whether I'm going to watch Better Call Saul Season 6, absolutely, but I watch it on Netflix, which I don't think has Season 6 yet. I only just watched Season 5, because they only just got Season 5. So I'm way behind on Better Call Saul. I love Better Call Saul. I think it's not as good as it was. The first 2 seasons of Better Call Saul Call Saul are probably the best 2 seasons of television that exist. It is by far the best television writing I've ever seen, the first 2 seasons. Seasons 3 through 5 were good. They're still a good show, but they're not that, right? They're not like, this is the best thing I've ever seen kind of stuff. So my thing is, like, I'm less, like, invested in the show now because I don't think it's as good as those first 2 seasons. I still will absolutely watch the rest of it because it's still a very good show compared to any other show, right? But I wasn't as, like, hype as I was with seasons 1 and 2 were unbelievable. I'd never seen anything quite like that. So, Rooktag, you don't necessarily need to watch Interstellar to enjoy the podcast, but if you ever plan on watching Interstellar, I would say watch it first, because we really talk a lot about everything that's in the movie and, like, how it's structured and how different things worked and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to totally destroy any first impressions you could have of the movie. So it's really assuming that, you know, like, it's the ultimate spoiler warning, right? Like, do not listen to a Molly Movie Club podcast episode for a movie you plan to watch, right? And we mostly do old movies, so, like, you know, presumably everyone has seen a lot of these movies, but if you haven't, we give plenty of warning. Like, we say, look, this is the movie that's coming up, you know, in 3 weeks or whatever. So you have plenty of time to watch it. We just expect you to watch it, right? So it's super spoilery. It's like more spoilery than anything else is, right? So basically, like, you know, picking apart a movie like that where you start talking about all the nitty-gritty, you then can't have an honest first impression of it, right? If you've heard that before you've seen it. So that's what I would say. So if you have any interest in watching Interstellar, don't go to the podcast yet. Watch Interstellar first, and then listen to the podcast. And for members, there's 3 more now coming. We do 1 free one a month for people who aren't subscribers. For people who are, 2001 is this Friday. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is the Friday after, and Moon is the Friday after that. So those are the ones that are coming up. Because we wanted to do ones, people recommended Interstellar, and we wanted to do movies that we thought it would make sense as to why, like, you know, 2001's very obvious because Interstellar, like, pulls pretty heavily from 2001. You can kind of tell. I mean, all space movies do in a way. It was kind of a progenitor, right? So we did a couple, and Wrath of Khan is in there because we thought it was an interesting diametrically opposed movie. Like, I mean, I again, don't really want to spoil or anything, but, like, you could say that they sort of are inverses in what they do right, if that makes sense. I mean, not really, but, like, or what they do exemplary, I would say, right? So, you know, anyway, all that's in the podcast. So if you like movies and you like thinking about movies as movies, as opposed to thinking about them as culture, which is all anyone ever talks about now. Like, nobody talks about movies anymore, except maybe you go find, like, a Red Letter Media episode or something, maybe does. But, like, movie reviewers don't talk about movies at all. If you go read a movie review, they don't mention anything about the movie in the entire review. It's only, like, cultural or casting, and then, like, the internet only talks about, like, did this company do something bad or whatever, right? And nobody talks about the actual, like, nitty-gritty of, like, okay, so does this scene set up this character to actually be sympathetic here, or did they not really do that so that this scene later doesn't really land because of blah, right? Or things like, was the cinematography good here? Like, did it actually convey the fact that these two things were in the same place? Or was the motion correctly done in here? Like, we just kind of go into that stuff, right? So, you know, it's that kind of thing. And so if you like that kind of thing, and you probably won't agree with us on everything, right? because you're going to have different opinions, and we encourage that. The movie club is about talking about, we don't care if people agree at all. We just want them focused on that. So it's like, we just try to like get people talking about that, right? Like get them talking about what is in the movie. And if it worked for you or if it didn't work for you, what are the actual things in the movie that made that happen, right? Instead of just like, oh, this is not how Batman should be or something, or whatever, like statements that don't really make much sense. They're totally fine things to have a discussion about in the broader context, like brand management and whether or not there's certain obligations to treat famous characters a particular way or any of that stuff, right? Totally fine discussions to have, but everyone's already having them. Like those discussions are just like ubiquitous, right? So there's no need for that because you can get that anywhere. So we try to focus everything away from that to basically like, you know, if it is a Batman movie and we want to talk about how it uses the Batman character, does it do that well is all we were really looking at, right? Like you know, we're not going to complain because it's not our personal version of Batman or something, right? Or we try not to anyway. So anyway. All that kind of stuff. So yeah, mollymovieclub.com. That's it. Easy to get to. And yeah, watch Interstellar first, if you haven't already, and head over. Right. And the other thing that we try to do that we hope is interesting is curate a good set of movies, right? Like we try to pick movies that people should see, to give them background that they might not have if they don't watch a lot of like older films, or films that are outside, maybe slightly outside the mainstream. We try to pick ones that are worth watching, right? Like not just because like, oh, we think, you know, really if you're not into foreign films, you don't understand cinema. It's like none of that crap. Just like if there's actually things done well in movies, we try to like point them out and say like, hey, this is a movie that did something very interesting. Here's what we think it is and why you might be interested in it or whatever, right? So anyway, check it out. Easy to get to. Yeah, I'll mention it again on next stream. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. I like the way this is shaping up. Next week, try some level gen, probably. And then we got to get combat in there. So just level gen and combat, I think. 'Cause the lighting looks nice now. It's good enough for us to do whatever we need to do, I think. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I will see you next weekend. Until then, have fun programming, and I'll see you on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.